Hello, I am an astral pilot. First off, let me say that I am sorry. I meant to get this video out a lot sooner, like only a couple days after Splatoon's first Big Run event, but then I got sick so I couldn't. Anyway, speaking of Big Run, Big Run is a new type of event in Splatoon similar to Splatfests, except instead of Super Sea Slugs at being your reward, you earn this big trophy of the Salmon King Kohozuna. But this got me wondering, what will the reward be for the next Big Run? After all, I doubt that there will only ever be one Big Run, so there must be more trophies. But there are no other kings. Or are there? In this video, I will be showing off my ideas for 3 new Salmon Run King bosses, including their inspiration and possible attack pattern or gimmicks. Here we go. May I present to you High and Dry. First off, its name. Many enemies in this game mode are named after real species of salmon. Quahog, Chinook. In fact, Kohozuna is itself most likely a portmanteau of Quahog and Yokozuna, the highest rank in sumo wrestling. So this name obviously comes from Hydra. I also mixed it with the word sockeye, another species of salmon that also appears as a stage in Salmon Run, creating another portmanteau that sounds like the phrase high and dry. Pretty ironic considering that I imagined that this king would only appear on low tide, as only its 3 snake-like heads would be visible above the water. It would still be in range for most weapons, but you would need to be careful as to not get too close to the water or else you will die. As already said, this king only appears on beaches during low tide. I guess there's nothing stopping this boss from appearing during other water level events. I just thought it would be cool if there were kings that only appeared under certain conditions. But anyway, one thing that players usually notice is that most bosses in Salmon Run have abilities that are similar to specials. The Drizzlers have Ink Storm, Big Shots have Wave Breaker, and the Flyfish have Tenta Missiles. This also applies to Kohozuna, who jumps into the air and lands similarly to a splashdown. High and Dry would be no different. This king would lurk around the water's edge, could shoot lasers from their mouths like a stingray, maybe even charge up an explosive projectile similar to a Booyah Bomb. But I think another cool attack they could do could be similar to the Ultra Stamp. However, instead of using a hammer, one of its 3 heads chomp into the ground and start munching away at the land. Also, unlike the Ultra Stamp, because it would be chomping away, its neck would leave a trail behind it as it went forward, which would also have a hitbox, meaning that not only would you be able to attack their neck, it could stretch over the whole stage, which could balance out the fact that this king would be in the water. This could also create barriers that you couldn't cross, possibly leading to situations where someone gets stuck in an especially bad situation. Beyond that, it could have a basic sweeping attack if it uses one of its head as a weapon. None of these attacks by themselves would be deadly, but combine that with the other bosses that will spawn, the fact that each head could probably use their own attack independently, and you have a deadly behemoth waiting to drag Grisco's workers to the bottom of the sea. Now onto its design. I like how Kohozuna adorned itself with an anchor. I like to think that maybe it's a rite of passage for new kings to attack and sink ships, take a part of it as a trophy. So I did something similar with High and Dry. However, instead of an anchor, I went with them dressing themselves in a sail and wrapping their tail up in rope that was probably used to set said sail. It's also a Hydra, so it also has multiple heads, each with their own tiny mohawk. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to Masusaurus. Now, Masusaurus is another portmanteau that derives itself from a species of salmon, except this time it's Masu salmon. This one is based on the concept of prehistoric fish who climbed out of the oceans and learned to breathe air, which is why instead of fins it has flippers and a tail. But its name also is meant to be similar to Masusaurus, an aquatic beast that was not actually a dinosaur, that was also one of the scariest hunters in the Triassic period. Not only that, but like with Kohozuna and its anchor and High and Dry and its sail, this monster wears a hull of a ship as armor, which it uses to glide around the stage and cut through land as if it were made of butter. Which brings me to how it attacks. Like the other kings and bosses, it uses a special as its main attack. This one uses a reef slider-like weapon. Like Kohozuna, the special is a lot slower than it is normally, with the predicted path being shown before it moves like normal, just very slow. However, instead of just blowing up when it reaches the end of the trail, it jumps into the air and dives directly into the ink, of course leaving behind a shockwave as they do it. Now, some of you have probably noticed the different color palette I used and are probably wondering why it's mostly pink. While we don't know a lot about the salmonids, we do know that a lot of bosses are basically regular salmonids that were promoted. Big shots and steelheads are quahawks, fly fish are small fry. Heck, we know that the small fry that make up the fish stick are training themselves to become stingers. This is probably what the kings are too. Salmonids are who have reached a final form, so to speak. While I can imagine Kohozuna being a bigger quahawk, especially with its name, this potentially means that the other kings might be based on smaller bosses, like the Maws perhaps. This is where its gimmick comes in. You see, after it uses Reef Slider, it dives into the ink and swims around. Perhaps not entirely under the ink so you could still do damage, but still, there is a lot less of it to hit. And then suddenly, a green ring of light and a set of jaws appear around you as the floor underneath you becomes enemy ink, and it jumps into the air, eating anyone who is still in the circle. If you want a visual, then it's basically the octolong from the first game. I can't show you any footage of that because it's on the Wii U and I haven't had one of those in a while, but it's basically that. After this attack, it would dive back into the ink and would just belly flop onto the ground as it consumes whatever it got, if it got anything at all. Because of it being a Maw, except bigger, staying in groups becomes a lot more dangerous than before. With an increased danger zone comes an increased chance that more of your teammates will get in, which could lead to a situation that no one wants to be in, being separated from your team. Finally, let's move on to the final boss of the night. Now, look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I had a hard time thinking of a concept of a third boss. That was one reason why this video took so long to make. My first idea was a salmonid who wore a gas mask-like accessory that was made of sirens, and its name would just simply be the Siren. But to me that sounded more like it could be just one of the normal bosses, and I was sorta stuck. But then it hit me, what if instead of basing it on a special weapon, the last king was based on a weapon class? And with that explanation, I present to you Sashi Nobi. Sashi Nobi's name is a mix of sashimi and shinobi. The concept for this comes both from swordfish and from schools of fish. Like High and Dry, who I would want to appear in low tide, I would want this king to only appear during high tide. The reason being that this king flies slightly above the stage. So, if you limit the amount of land the players can go, less likely they'll be in places where they can't hit the boss. Only then will it fly out of the murky sea with its minions not far behind them. Speaking of those minions, that will be its gimmick. It brings smaller versions of themselves called Sashi Minis. These small yet nimble pests act similarly to Fry's eels, mostly swarming around their master. Both the Sashi Minis and Sashi Nobis come equipped with masts similar to the trophies that the other kings have acquired. Except these masts are soaked in their own ink, allowing them to splatter turf by flailing around. Other than that, they will spend whatever opportunity they have trying to catch you when you're off guard to dive bomb you and skewer you. However, they can be easily defeated just by shooting them with enough ink. Unlike normal bosses, which drop 3 eggs, each Sashi Mini that gets splattered will only drop 1 egg, not unlike the Chinooks that appear during a mothership round. Other than dive bombing, they could also fly around their target, unleashing small, slow-moving Splatoon slashes. As for their leader, there are 2 types of attacks I can imagine this king performing. The first could be similar to the mini counterparts. The second attack could more like a bombing run, flying around the stage in a straight line, raining down ink as it goes. If you need a visual, then imagine the Octo Shower boss from Splatoon 2, just absolutely leaving chaos in its wake. One last note, I think that out of all the kings, this one would have the least amount of health, both because of the fact that it's flying, and its minions only dropping 1 egg compared to the drop rate of the normal bosses being 3. And so those are my ideas for the new Salmon Run kings. Do I think that these are for sure going to be in the game, or what they'll be looking like? No, not at all. I'm just some random dude on the internet. But in my mind, there's no way that there won't be more kings, especially if there are more big run events. Theorizing about the future is very fun, and I had fun making this video. Sorry that it just took so long. But while I was gone, one of my videos had reached 1,000 views, which may not be much, but I see it as a big step for me, especially since I don't even have a tenth of that many subscribers. Speaking of which, you should do that if you haven't. Even more so if you actually enjoyed this video. I want to make videos more consistently, so I promise I won't go silent for 5 months again. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and have a nice day.